Because when David runs from King Saul a few years later out of the palace, he goes to the cave at Adullam. What do you think's going through his mind? How do you think he feels? What do you think he thinks about all the stories he's been told by his grandparents and his parents about God who's protected Israel and provided for them? What do you think is going through his mind? In 1 Samuel 22, it says, David departed from a place called Nob, which was a ways away, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Remember that little hole there at the beginning? The cave of Adullam. Now, what's interesting is that the cave of Adullam has a little narrow opening here that I showed you in the first slide. There's another opening a little bigger, not very far away from the small opening. But there are 40 different rooms. They call them rooms. Some are very small for 1 or 2 people. But the passageways under that mountain lead around to 40 different rooms. One place is big enough that they actually put in a millstone trough and a small millstone so that while they were hiding in the cave, they could grind their grain for food. They also had another place, round and a circular stone, to crush grapes so they could provide themselves with something to drink. You see, down in the valley of Elah, not only would there be barley fields, but there were vineyards. And they could sneak out of the cave at night, get some grain, get some grapes, come back and provide for themselves. So David goes to the cave of Adullam, and he goes, and his brothers and all his father's household heard of it, and they went down there to him. In other words, David's family heard that he had gone to the cave of Adullam, and they went and found him. Now, what's interesting in verse 2 of 1 Samuel 22, everybody knew that Saul was upset. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with the king. They were literally afraid for their lives. If the king's mad, nobody's safe. And he was out searching, chasing David around the countryside. And of course, they would ask, Saul and his soldiers would ask, have you given aid and comfort? Did you give David and his group food and water? Did you house them? Did you protect them? That's why everybody's afraid of King Saul and his soldiers. So his brothers and his family find him. They go to the cave of Adullam. And verse 2 of 1 Samuel 22, other people are so afraid of King Saul that they decide they might join David. Verse 2 of 1 Samuel 22 says, everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Now there were about 400 men with him. He starts out with 30 men. He winds up with 400 people. Notice who they are. They're people who are in distress. They're as scared as David of Saul. They're people who are in debt. They owe other people something and they're scared. Other people who are in debt. And everyone who is discontented. Well, that could be just about everybody on any given day. I even have days where I'm discontented. These people all joined together with David, and he became captain over this group of people who are fearful and afraid. Well, guess who else is? David. David is. He's scared of what's going to happen to him. So, what do you think David's feeling and going through his mind and heart when he gets to the cave of Adullam? Well, first is Psalm 57, Lessons from the Cave. I mean, what are you going to do in a cave? Now, we know that some people, while they were in caves, drew pictures on the wall, right? And some people, while they were in caves, hewed out places for fires, hewed out places to store things like that. But what are you going to do if you're afraid to go out? You're afraid because you're in distress. You're afraid because you're in debt. You're afraid because you're discontented. You feel fear for your life. What are you going to do in a cave? There are 2 lessons from Psalm 57 that David learns in a cave. And we know what's going through his mind. First of all, Psalm 57:1 says, "Be gracious to me, O God, be gracious to me, for my soul takes refuge in you. Why did David go in the cave of Adullam? Because he wanted protection. What's going through David's mind while he's in the cave of Adullam in verse 1? He wants God's protection. He doesn't just want the protection of a hiding place, a cave. He wants to know that even if he comes out of the cave, God will be more important to him than a cave is. You know, Peter learned that lesson in our lessons. Walking on the water was less important than keeping his eyes on Jesus. Jesus said to him, "Take courage. I am right here." You know what he says today? You're not in a cave and you're not walking on water, but you're sitting right here. And he says to you and me, and he says, "Take courage. I am right here." You know what David was praying in Psalm 57:1? God, I need your protection. What does God do? God protects us. You don't have to go in a cave to have God's protection. Second thing we know about David, what he's thinking and what's going on in his life, is in verse 3 of Psalm 57. He says, "He will send from heaven and save me." In the song it was, "He'll rescue me." Rescue me. That's literally in Hebrew what the word save means, is to rescue. What did David want? Running around from city to city with this group of people that he's inherited. What does he want? He wants to be rescued, saved. There are a lot of things we can be rescued from. The most important thing to be rescued from is sometimes ourselves, and for sure, our sin. Jesus came as the Savior, the rescuer of the world from sin. So the second thing we can learn about what was going through David's mind as he prays in Psalm 57 is in verse 3. He will send from heaven and rescue me. He wants God to protect him and rescue him. Now, there are other lessons we could learn from Psalm 57, but let's go to Psalm 142, because this is another psalm that David writes in the cave at Adullam. Can you imagine as he comes to the opening of the cave and he looks out across the valley of Elah, and in his mind he remembers the great victory over Goliath and all the songs that were being sung about him? Saul has killed his hundreds, but David has killed his thousands. Oh, David's a better protector of Israel than King Saul is. And as time went by, the people of Israel liked David more than they liked their own king, and that became a problem for Saul. And now David's looking out in the valley of Elah, and he remembers the great victory that was won there by the hand of God. Although David's the one who twirled the stone, God's the one who placed the stone. And now he comes out of that cave entrance, and it's not a day of celebrating great victory. Now it's a day of being afraid to come out in the open. You know, there are good days, and there are bad days. There are days when everything's going well at home, and then there are days where things are not so good. And the same God who gave the victory in the valley of Elah is the same God who is the protection and refuge and Savior in the cave of Adullam. So another thing that David learns, and in this psalm, Psalm 142, he learns that God hears anytime. Verse 1 and 2 and the first part of verse 3 say, "I cry aloud with my voice." The word cry doesn't mean wah. It means to wail at the top of your voice. It's that wail of life-shattering wail. I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication. The word supplication is a big word for prayer. I'm begging God. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. He's not keeping it inside and wringing his hands. He's letting it out. He's venting. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. Do you ever like to share when you're in trouble? I've been on trips and I've been doing the driving, and I don't like to admit when I get in trouble and know I'm lost. And I don't want to stop and ask for direction. David's not afraid to admit he's in trouble, but listen, he says, I declare my trouble before him. I pour out my complaint. I make supplication. I cry aloud with my voice. What do you think he's doing? Literally at the top of his lungs in the cave, he's hollering at God and telling him where he's at and what's going on. The first line of verse 3, when my spirit was overwhelmed within me. Now you get a sense of his emotional state. He feels overwhelmed. Now, in about 3 weeks, kids, you're going to be overwhelmed. And some of you adults here are going to get overwhelmed too, because some of you are teachers and workers in schools. And you're going to feel real overwhelmed. I can grin now. I can look at a yellow bus go down the road and go, see you later. What can we learn from David there? We can learn that God hears any time. Any time. Overwhelmed, scared, fearful, on the run, afraid, God hears any time. So don't wait. Fourth thing we can learn from this cave of Adullam is this. Verse 3. There are 4 lines in verse 3. Verse A went with God hears anytime. Line 2, line 3, and line 4 of verse 3 go with the next point. God knows when I don't. You knew my path in the way where I walk. They have hidden a trap for me. You know what? There are some things you will never know. You'll never know it ahead of time. You'll know when it comes. And when it comes, you know what? You wish you'd had warning. But know this. Know this. God knows even when you don't. You see, even while David's still in the cave, afraid of Saul, on the run for his life, guess what David admits? I don't know what's going to happen, but I know you do. Now, for us human beings, we don't like to admit that we don't know what's going to happen with the stock market. We don't like to know what's going to happen at school. We don't like to know what's going to happen a lot of times. But rest assured, there's someone who does know. That's what David learned in the cave at Adullam. He says, God knows when I don't. They have hidden a trap for me. He knows there's something out there waiting for him, but he also knows God knows even if he doesn't. The final thing we can learn from the lesson of the cave of Adullam is simply this. In verse 4 of Psalm 142, which David writes in the cave, he says, look to the right and see. Why to the right? Because David is right-handed. He's strong. That's his strong arm. That's his power. The right hand in Near Eastern culture was the position of favor and power. And he says, look to the right and see. He's saying, look around and see if there's anybody who's there to stand up for me and protect me. Where's my power coming from? Look to the right and see, for there's no one who regards me. What's he saying? Nobody cares about me. My mother, when I was a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, taught me a song. It went like this. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. Guess I'll go eat worms. Big ones, fat ones, little ones, juicy ones. Guess I'll go eat worms. You ever have that day when you feel like you're out on an island all by yourself and no one around you cares about you? David did. Look to the right and see, for there's no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. Where does David think he's going to end up? Trapped in the cave of Adullam and die. Now, I haven't been trapped in a cave, but I've been in some situations in my life where I thought, this is it. It's all over. I don't see any way out. I don't see how anything or anyone can ever get me out of this jam. Last line of verse 4 is very telling. No one cares for my soul. Now, here's the fact check. Is what David's saying in verse 4 true? If I say that to myself, is it true? If you say that to yourself, is it true? Does it matter who says no one cares for me? Is it true? There's one person who will always care for me when no one else does. It's God. God cares for me when no one else does. Not only did you learn that in Cave Quest theme about God giving us direction and God giving us courage and God giving us light and love, but now you learn that God protects us all the time and He doesn't need a cave to do it. God saves us. He's the rescuer of us. God hears us anytime, so don't wait to cry out to God, to pray to Him. God knows when I don't. I don't know a lot of things. May surprise you, but I don't. But I know that God knows when I don't. And the final thing we can learn from the cave of Adullam this morning is that God cares when no one else does. Lessons from the cave. You know, we've had a great time this week. We picked 2 of the 3 hottest days all summer long to have Bible school, and I got to be outside with the games. And so did Stephen. He got to come out and help me. And I appreciate that. And I just want to end everything this morning, first of all, with thanks. Thanks, Mom and Dads, for letting us teach your kids some lessons about God and trust from the Bible. Thank you for being diligent to bring them. We enjoyed having all of them. Second, I want to thank everyone who helped with Bible school. We had a great bunch of people helping. Some people helped in advance. Some people made cookies and we ate them. Some people came every night and prepared a meal. Some of our youth were shepherds and led the children around the various stations. Some cleaned up. Some taught the lesson. Some, as you saw with Ross, put on the skit. Some people decorated the church. You haven't seen anything. If you go downstairs in the fellowship hall, you'll see more of their decorations and handiwork. Some people sat at a table and took the names and wrote down the information we needed and passed out the name tags. Some people ran the media center. Some people sang. Some people stood in front and gave the motions. Some prayed and never came. But they were important people. Some people worked in the kitchen. Some people served the food. Some people gave money so we could have a church building to come to. Some people couldn't come because they're working now. You see, it took a lot of people to do it all. Another lesson David learned was that he always needed others to help him. So thank you all, those who volunteered and helped. We appreciate your help very much. So I'm going to embarrass you. Noah was our teacher. Stand up, Noah. Stephen was my helper. Brooke was a helper with the groups. Max was a shepherd. Ruthie was a shepherd. Elijah was a shepherd. Chloe was a shepherd and a motion director. Yay. And helped with the songs too. And the Word Up stuff. Then we have Flo, who helped in the kitchen. And we also had Karen, who helped in the kitchen. She's up there hiding. Noah ran Media Center up there. Or Levi. Sorry, Levi, I did it again. Levi ran Media Center. Karen helped in the kitchen. Deb and Craig Smith helped in the kitchen. We appreciate that. Deb Lawson was helping with the group. Ed is the song leader. He's the one with the voice that we all enjoy. Deb, Craig, stand up, stand up. Charles was a gopher. I mean, he went for everything we needed and ran around, did all kinds of stuff. Jan made some food. That's his wife next to him. Jan, thank you. And I think some other people, Bernice, I know you made cookies, and we used your cookies. Stand up, Bernice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gracie registered the people. Maria helped keep Noah and Ross in line. Ross, where are you? Ross downstairs. Maria, stand up. Now then, the person I can't thank who engineered all this wonderful stuff you see and they learned is my wife, because she's downstairs. So a hand for Gail and all these wonderful people. If you are part of the Flack Church family, would you stand up? Because these are the people who prayed and who give of themselves, their time, and their resources in order that we can do this. So thank you all very much. Ed, when you come and sing, when we're done, we're not done. I got a few things to say. Okay? Okay. Have a seat. Wait, is the slideshow next, or are you next? I got my paper, Ed. But you do have a closing song? It says it ends with a slideshow. After I talk. I've talked. I'll tell you what. We have a slideshow of VBS, but I want to give you some instructions so that when the slideshow ends, we can get up and move, okay? Because you've been real good to sit still and listen to an old man. Okay. When we get done, we have food for the adult staff and the teen helpers and the moms and dads of the kids to VBS and all those who helped in the VBS. We've got some food and drink downstairs. And then there are a few things outside that this guy in Ross decided we needed to have. So there are a few things for kids. First eat. And then if you want to slip into some other clothes you brought or just go with what you got, then there are a few things outside that you can go do, okay? We want to say thank you very much. Gail and I do want to say thank you very much to everybody who helped. Everybody, and by the way, this isn't everybody who helped. There are some people here we just can't get you to see, okay? But thank you, all you who helped. So the slideshow, and then after the slideshow, because I'm going to pray now for the food, I'm going to get that out of the room. So that at the end of the slideshow, you're free to get up, come join us downstairs with the food. Count on you, Carter, good buddy. Come and eat and enjoy the time together. You can leave whenever you want to. If you've got other things you need to get to, that's fine, we understand. But come and at least share some food and some liquid and just sit down and talk to one another. You'll also get to see some of the work they did downstairs.